Hello, Steeler Nation, and welcome to your Steeler Nation podcast, part of the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network and sponsored by Total Sports Enterprises. I'm your host, Stryker, and we can now say bye-bye to the bye week. Bye week's over, heading back into the season, and we're as healthy as ever, finally. We just got two of our injured reserve players back, and they're both practicing fully in Zach Banner and Anthony McFarland, who is now going to be the number 2 running back. Still don't know the capacity that Zach Banner is going to be. He can either be starting at right tackle or he might be the swing tackle. And that would mean either Chooks is starting at right tackle or he'll be starting at left tackle, which means that Moore will either be starting at left tackle or he'll be the swing tackle. So we got a lot of moving parts here. We're not sure who's going to be where. Tomlin and the coaching staff mentioned like a rotational basis for the top 3 tackles. We'll have to see how that works out in the game, but I'm just excited to see Banner back in there. Can't wait to see him bulldozing people, and he can't wait to hit people. I know that. And he's going to be ready for this game. Carlos Davis was a surprise. I thought he was starting to trend upward. He was limited all practice week 2 weeks ago, so I thought the extra week would help. Turns out he regressed. He is now on injured reserve. He's going to miss the next 3 weeks, so the earliest game he can come back for is in week 11. And the earliest he's come back is October 22nd, right after that 3rd game. So he has to miss week 8, week 9, and week 10 and has a chance coming back for the Monday after week 11, for week 11. Eric Ebron was brand new to the injury report yesterday, has a hamstring. He was limited. We'll have to see. He's probably going to be questionable, but we'll have to see if he ends up playing on Sunday. Definitely a big part of the passing game with Juju Smith-Schuster out. He's been kind of our big body over the middle of the field now, kind of taking that role that Juju used to have from us. Ben's back in practice, and of course, he's not going to miss the game. He's still a little banged up with that left pectoral and his hip, but he's, of course, going to be starting. Claypool was limited first day of practice as well, but he's been practicing with that hamstring. He should be playing this weekend. And Dan Moore, who I listed on my injury report because he was pulled out of the last game, he wasn't listed at all on the injury report this week. So his hip/back, whatever pulled him out of that game against Seattle, he's good to go. Like I said, we got a 3 offensive tackle rotation, and everybody else is golden. So we've got a lot of these mild groin injuries that happen. Sorry, Ingram had a groin as well, and he was limited, but he's going to be playing, and I expect him to be rotating in. And we'll talk about him a little bit later on in the show here too. But the first thing that I wanted to touch base on was the Browns injuries as well. The Browns are way bad off. They got banged up right before playing on Thursday again on a short week. They've had a mini bye, having 10 days off since the Thursday previous. But even with that, their practice and injury report is not looking good. All of their receivers, Odell Beckham, Peoples-Jones hasn't practiced at all. He's not going to play. But you have Odell Beckham and you have Landry Jones. Both of them were limited all week. Don't know. I guess they're kind of questionable for this week. Same as they're both starting offensive tackles being limited for most of the week. They're starting center not getting snaps on Thursday. So we'll have to see if he can even play. So that is a banged up offensive line, which might be one of the best offensive lines in the league when everybody's ready to go. But without a starting center, I'd expect one of the snaps to hit the ground, especially since we still don't know who's going to be the quarterback. I mean, they know Baker's been limited. We all know Case Keenum can play, but if Baker's trying to push his way back with that left shoulder injury, his non-throwing shoulder, it looks like they have it in some kind of sling device within his shoulder pads. So we'll have to see how he works out in it. And if he can play, he's trying to come back. And then they're banged up on running back as well. Nick Chubb being limited all week. You've got Hunt that's already out. Obviously, their other running back was phenomenal last week. Dearness Johnson, how can I forget that name? But Dearness Johnson had a great week. Put up over 100 yards. I mean, anybody can run behind that line when it's perfectly up and ready to go. But it just comes down to the injuries. How are they going to execute? We don't know how they're going to execute. Defensively, they got a bunch of guys out as well. Jadeveon Clowney not practicing all week. Obviously, he's missed the last couple games. Malik Jackson being limited. Rashard LeCounte was the third was listed as not playing. I know he's a backup and it's a discipline issue, but the discipline issue hasn't been listed yet. And I'm interested to see what that is because they can use everybody that they need and maybe they're just limiting him for practice. But we'll have to see. Mac Wilson, who's a backup linebacker, he practiced fully. And Takaris McKinley too. He was limited with a groin, and we all know why the groin injuries work. You're limited. He practiced the first day, next day comes back with a groin limited. We'll have to see if he plays. Especially since we got to figure out with Melvin Ingram's groin, since he's really the only person that's been limited this week, other than Eric Ebron, who got that surprise injury with his hamstring there, second practice. So lots of things up in the air for the practice, for at least for the game this week. But I think the Steelers are much healthier coming into this game. I think the matchups definitely help out the Steelers a lot more. And I'm looking forward to their offense finally starting to click in this running game to really start to establish the run and to take some pressure off of Ben, for God's sakes. Take some pressure off the receiving core. Everybody needs a little help. Everybody just needs a little bit of help. And I want to talk now about Mike Tomlin's press conference. My gosh, did you see the emotion when he was asked if he would ever consider becoming a head coach in college football? Brooke Pryor, fortunately, was on site for ESPN. She reports on the Steelers. She was able to tweet out, Mike Tomlin said he didn't have the time to shoot down college coaching rumors, but then he found some time with an absolute evisceration of the speculation. And then he stated, hey, guys, I don't have time for that speculation. That's a joke to me. I got one of the best jobs in all of professional sport. Why would I have any interest in coaching college football? That would be the last time I address it. Not only today, but moving forward. Never say never, but never, okay? Anybody else got questions about college jobs? There's not a booster with a big enough blank check. They asked any more questions as Tomlin was getting up when no more questions were asked. He said, thank you. Anybody asking Sean Payton about that? Anybody asking Andy Reid about that? Stuff like that. And he got up, stood up hot. That was the most emotion I've seen out of that coach. And I was pumped up watching it. This guy loves being a Pittsburgh Steeler. He's only motivated coaching the Pittsburgh Steelers. And he's right. It's the best job in professional sports, because what other job will they give you 15 years as a head coach? Last three coaches have gone 15 years, man. Nearly 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21. One more year. Tomlin coaches next year, he'll be 15 years. And he's definitely coaching next year. Even if he has a losing season this year, he's going to be coaching next year because he's going to be part of the rebuild. He's young enough to do the rebuild. He wants to be here. His kids are growing up in town. He doesn't have to move anywhere. He doesn't have to relocate his family. I mean, best job in all professional sports. Easily said. And I know Joe Hayden came out and backed him up as well, stating on just how great of a coach he is. But I wanted to also just do a little mental experiment. And I do think Mike Tomlin would be a great college coach. I mean, he's an excellent motivator of men, a leader of men. He cares about boys becoming men with all of the off-site mentoring programs that he does outside of the Steelers. He's a big proponent of helping boys mature and become men, and that's a big part of the college experience. He's accountable and would hold his players accountable. He's an academic and would expect his players to be academic as well, making sure they get their grades done. They don't have good grades. They're not doing their work in class. They don't play. I mean, that's like old Penn State Joe Pa. I mean, he always made sure his athletes did their work in school first. If they did, they could play. If not, they weren't playing. And that's a form of accountability as well. And that's something that's really important with the college experience. He's also an excellent communicator, and his NFL success and reputation as an honest and accountable man would really help him out with recruiting. Because recruiting, you want to look at parents in the eye, tell them you're going to be there, you're going to work to help make their child, their boy become a man and help them out, not only as a football coach, but as a mentor and as an example. Great character man, excellent character man. And that's more than you can say then for a lot of these big coaches in the NFL that have marks on their record, either recruiting violations, violations with giving money to families, problems in the personal realm, inappropriateness, with students, giving them favors, giving them money, things like that. That's the kind of stuff that you wouldn't have to worry about at all with Coach Tomlin. But is he ever going to become a college coach? Hell no. No freaking way. I mean, he's already said it. College coaching is a full-time job. There is no off time in college coaching. You're constantly working. You're constantly working to try to recruit. You've got to visit families upon families upon families, get kids in, go check out kids and scout kids on that range as well. And that's a lot more driving around than recruiting for the NFL. Coming to the NFL, you have to go to Indy. You might go to a couple colleges, a couple of the main colleges, check them out. But you got to go to every family that you're trying to recruit. If you're trying to get somebody big, and when you have rosters around 80, 90 kids, some 100 in some programs here in the NCAA, I mean, that's a ton of recruiting, especially when Steelers only have a roster of 53 and they've only got to recruit a handful every year, maybe around 20. But even that, like I said, there's not as many places you have to go to there. So NFL, at least you have some downtime after, the draft until you get up to the combine. Then combine, you're working on kids, you're looking at them, you're bringing them in. So you got about a month off from February to March. If you lose in the playoffs earlier, January to March, I mean, you're still doing a little bit of work. You're getting ready for the draft. You're understanding your needs. You're having your communications to the players as they're leaving their meetings, at the end of the year that coaches have always, Coach Cowher did it. Coach Tomlin does that as well. So they're able to see if you're coming back, work things out, know what their roster is going to be so they can set their needs and they know where they're going into the draft and free agency. But you got some time off. And then once the draft happens, you got a little bit of time off after the draft until you hit free agency. You got about a month. So that aspect of it too helps. And, it's not a full-time job like college is. That's just such a tougher situation. And you're under way more pressure with boosters. The microphone's hotter. Or sorry, the microscope is hotter, and everybody just expects you to win, especially when you're in a big program. And if you're not winning right away, they want to get rid of you. So why go to someplace that might be a 2-3 year experiment, move your family around when you're locked in at Pittsburgh? Absolutely locked in at Pittsburgh, and I don't blame them at all for wanting to stay. Other question, the final thing I want to touch base on, we've heard that Melvin Ingram wants a trade. Didi Kinkhabwala reported on that, Steelers reporter for NFL Network. And, he might want to trade, but he knew full well coming in here that he was going to be a backup. He was going to be rotational. He was going to get his starts if something happened to Highsmith, if something happened to Watt. But his best role is in a rotational basis. Sure, another team can offer the world. Maybe you think about listening to something like that if they're offering the world. But outside of offering the world, there's probably not anything else I'd want to give up for him outside of like a day 1, day 2 pick. I mean, that's smoking the ganja there if he's expecting to get a day 1, day 2 pick out of a rotational player for us. But you got to keep in mind, he would be the starting edge to whoever picked him up. They would be expecting you to get starter snaps out of him. They'd be expecting him to pressure the quarterback significantly each game. So to get a starting edge player, is it worth a first or second or third? It might be. It might be if you're desperate enough and you're trying to think that's the only piece that you need to get you to the playoffs, maybe even the Super Bowl. You might make that move. But more honestly, it's probably going to be an offer would be like a 5th or 6th rounder, maybe conditional 4th. And for the Steelers that can use that rotational player and that safety valve in case something happens to one of their top 2, then yes, you keep him on the roster because you're trying to make the playoffs. And right now the Steelers are 3-3. We're at 500 after the bye. If they go 7-4 down the stretch, have a 10-7 record, I think that would be enough to make the playoffs this year. Having 7 teams making the playoffs, I think double digits would pretty much assure you making the playoffs. So road to 7 more wins, road to the 7th Super Bowl. That's what we're looking at right now come the bye week. So mark that down on your calendars. Win 7 to get to 7. That's what we got to do, number 7. And if you're at the helm doing it nice and healthy, I think Big Ben can do that. He's a big part of this for us, moving for that. So now we reach the time of the podcast where we take questions from Steeler Nation. Go on over to the Great Football Forum at SteelerNation.com. Sign up for free. We post a thread every week where we take questions from Steeler Nation. And the first questions we're going to take from is going to be from Cooley Man. Which quarterback would I rather face on Sunday, Baker or Case Keenum? To tell you the truth, I'd probably rather face Baker. I think Baker has probably more skill than Keenum, but he's coming off that injury. He's not as sharp, might have some rust, playing hurt, might make some mistakes. He's more prone to mistakes, I think, than Case Keenum. I think Case Keenum's a slightly smarter quarterback, doesn't make the big throw into traffic, doesn't turn the ball over, though, too. And that's huge. When you have a great running attack, you have a great defense that can also be opportunistic. All you have to do is don't turn the ball over. Trent Dilfer won a championship in 2000 with the Ravens doing that. And Case Keenum can do just as good of a job with that defense and that running game if their running game gets going. If it's Case on the field, we got to shut down the run, force him to throw. If Baker's on the field, force him to throw, get him on the edge, get him moving. That's where he makes mistakes. Can the defensive line shut down the running game or at least slow it down enough to add pressure on whoever is a quarterback? I hope to hell so. I think we're going to get pressure no matter what, especially if we get in 3rd and long conditions. But we have to shut down that run first. We can't have it be 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3 every time because that's just putting us behind the 8 ball. And then we don't know if they're going to run or pass, especially if they're pushing the ball on us pretty effectively with that offensive line, which is a great offensive line. It means Wormley's got to step up. It means whoever's in the middle's got to step up now, whether it's going to be Bugs, who it has been Bugs here the last couple weeks, or whether who's Loudermilk, you're going to rotate him over. You're going to find another person to plug there in the center. That might be an option. And that might be something Mondu. We don't know. But we have to do a better job at stopping the run because we did a really poor job against Seattle in the second half last week. Those combo blocks were annihilating the Steelers, especially when they were in 2 and 3 down lineman positions, utilizing the only other people on the line being edge players and outside linebackers who are undersized. How many targets should Pat Freiermuth get? From Cooley Man, 10, 20? To me, yeah, as many as you can. I think we're getting to the point where we're going to see Freiermuth starting to get double-digit targets. He's already shown he can take that kind of scrutiny. He's going to catch the ball. He's got excellent hands. Some of the best hands we've seen on a tight end since, dare I say, Heath. And now we can yell, Muth. Love yelling Muth. We should be yelling Najee as well. I yell that at games, but nobody's jumped on the long E for Najee yet, too. But that guy does some special stuff, and he's fun to say. But target Freiermuth as much as you can. He's going to be a big proponent at helping to defer the loss of Juju Smith-Schuster. We got to do it with Freiermuth. We got to do it with Ebron, and we got to do it with whoever else is coming out of the backfield, and whether you're plugging in Derek Watt at at fullback as well. And those guys are going to have to be the one to carry the load in the offensive game and the short receiving games. And Ray's got to pick it up a little bit too there in the middle. And last question by Cooley Man. Did the Steelers have routes that take the receiver over the middle? Obviously a joke. They have not done a good job of attacking the middle of the field. They took a good shot to Washington in the one game, Claypool to another, where they had a touchdown, Claypool right on a post. I remember that between 3 receivers, 3 defenders, and it was a nice throwing over the first one between the other 2 by Ben. It was probably his best throw of the season, his best deep throw of the season. So yes, we do have to start attacking the middle field. That's cut calls for Eric Ebron, again, Freiermuth, Ray. You got to help us out there in the middle of the field. But I'm hoping we find some moves and even some quick slants. Even if we have, I'd like to see Deontay Johnson on a quick slant, being the only man on his side of the field as well. If somebody has outside contain on a blitz and a hot read, he could rip it to the house. He's that type of player. Slash Steel asks a fun question. Have I seen Cannonball Run? Yes, I grew up a child of the 80s. My dad, he was one of the people that were ahead of the curve. He had cable and he paid for HBO. So Cannonball Run was like on TV all the time on HBO when I was a kid. Loved watching Terry Bradshaw. What was that? The Tropicana stock car that they were racing in that one. Really fun movie. The second one, I had a fun time watching that one as well. But I didn't get into it after that. Once Dom DeLuise and Burt Reynolds are gone in the Rat Pack, it just wasn't as fun of a thing. It was a cool thing, but it wasn't as fun. But those guys really had a great time. It came across, and that you could tell it was as fun to act in it and to be around all those fun personalities as it was to view it on screen. And the bloopers of the Cannonball Run movies, nothing's as fun as watching the bloopers during the closing credits of those movies. Absolutely, absolutely famous. Rosary Bleeds was one of the best ones. That was Sammy Davis Jr. when he was pretending to be a priest and he was trying to say rosary beads and they all lose it and they're all making fun of him. It's so fun. Such a fun group of guys that all knew and loved each other. Last questions here from Drink Iron City. Can Freiermuth continue to impress as in for the whole season? Is he the real deal? I agree with you, Drink Iron City. Yes. Yes, he is the real deal. This guy's looking like baby Heath. He came in week 1 as the starting number 1 tight end. We had Eric Ebron on the field too for the first snap, but he's been starting every game since. He's big part of our 2 tight end set. I know we've been rotating in Zach Gentry as well as the 1 tight end in running set. So he's really doing a good job of blocking with that 6'9" frame. Kudos to Zach Gentry as well. But yes, Freiermuth is the real deal. His snaps will continually increase all season because they're working him in as a tight end. But I think he can be a Heath Miller type of middle of the field tight end, both in the pass catching game and be a good blocker as well. And I'd love that. I think right now, he's not as good of a blocker as Heath, definitely not yet, but I think he can build to there. He can build a little bit more size, a little bit more technique, but he has the willingness to want to do it. So yes, and I love him. Like I said, day 2 of the draft, Pat Freiermuth, at the beginning of the draft, I said he's the only player I will take over any offensive lineman. If he's still on the board, he was still on the board. I was Nostradamus for a day. Obviously, I have nothing to do with the coaching. And it was like the only time I've ever called a player. I couldn't even call the first pick right. I said Travis Etienne. Yeah, I was going running back, but I had the wrong running back. So next question from Drink Iron City. Will Eric Ebron hold his mouth, as he says, for the remainder of the season with his targets slipping? Eric Ebron is a very vocal player. I don't think he's like as much of a distraction or a negative vocal person like Antonio Brown was, but I think that sometimes the things that he says can be taken out of context and used against the Steelers. And he's done a really good job of not being that type of distraction. He really has. I've expected him to be a distraction before now, but since he hasn't been, he's in the second year of his 2-year contract. Don't know if we're bringing him back next year, obviously, just because his hands are suspect, and he is an incapable blocker. So that just doesn't really fit what the Steelers are doing in the middle of the field. Look for the Steelers to try to pick up another, running back in the offseason, but at least for the remainder of this season, I will just disagree with the fact that his targets are going to slip. I think they're going to bring him on the field as that big receiver, as a big slot receiver when we go 4 wide receiver, because he's really not a tight end anymore. If we use him strictly as a big wide receiver, a big slot receiver, I think that's his value with this team, and his targets will go up a little bit. And he might get, 6 to 8 targets a game. And that's what Juju Smith-Schuster used to get. So if he's starting to make those plays, if he's catching the football, his numbers should actually be going up a little bit, and he'll be a bigger part of this offense. When will the secret weapon of Stephon Tuitt be revealed? I just wish he was practicing, man. I wish he was practicing. His 21-day window hasn't started yet. Bye week has happened. Who knows? I'm not expecting him back this month. We're going to have this conversation in November because, we're pretty much at the last week anyway. So that's not a big, a big thing. But I'd be surprised if he is back before Thanksgiving. After Thanksgiving is when I will say to expect Stephon Tuitt. If he's coming back in December, it will be big because it'll be fresh for the end of the season, which we've never really had Stefan Tuitt fresh for the end of the season. He'd be a big boost to this defensive line, and I'd love to see him and Hayward wrecking people with the big outside edges coming off, the three-headed monster of Ingram and Watt and Highsmith rotating around those big bodies and getting to quarterbacks, making pressure, making plays in the backfield. Just be a absolute love to watch that. And last thing from Drink Iron City, thank you, Cope, for doing all the media stuff that you do. Greatly appreciated of your time and effort. You're very welcome. Thank you, Steeler Nation, over at SteelerNation.com football forum for providing these awesome questions. Obviously, I post over there as Cope. That's what they refer to me as, but that's my moniker over there. So come on over, have a great time. Excellent football discussion. Something to do between games. Make sure you guys go over to tseshop.com to check out our sponsor, Total Sports Enterprises. Great signed merchandise, fun stuff over there as well. Great holiday shopping ideas. Make sure you go over to tseshop.com. Guys, for iPhone users and fans, join us on the Steeler Nation Colorcast Mondays at 7 o'clock and follow me at SN Stryker. And that is for any Apple store, for iPod, iPhone. It's really fun. It's like a bunch of Steeler friends talking in a room. That's really what it is. And I can have you on in the hot seat. We give away free signed gifts every week. We just gave away a San Antonio signed helmet to Cassie. She was our big winner this week out of Indiana. So congratulations, Cassie. And it's a lot of fun. It's just a blast to do. And thank you very much to Evan and the Colorcast people over there for having us. And that is Monday nights at 7 p.m. Join us on the vidcast at 1 p.m. on Tuesdays following Mike Tomlins' presser at noon, where we chop that down, talk about the injury situation and the upcoming week and recap the game a little bit. And that's on the videos over there on the Big Play Network and at SteelerNation.com. Sorry, the Steeler Nation channel over at YouTube. Read our great articles at SteelerNation.com. Tweet us at Steeler Nation. Instagram us at SteelerNation.com. Or follow the Steeler Nation podcast on Twitter at _SN Podcast. Instagram is Steeler Nation Podcast. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at SN Stryker, Stryker spelled with a Y. And also be sure to come over to DK Pittsburgh Sports. Awesome stuff at DK Pittsburgh Sports. We're part of the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. Excellent podcasts over there, especially Yinzers. Love what those ladies are doing as well. Thank you for joining us on the SteelerNation.com podcast, sponsored by Total Sports Enterprises, part of the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. And I am your host, G. Stryker, rooting along with you as always. Go Steelers!